So today I am going to continue teaching on the book, Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism. And today the chapter is the one called Spiritual Materialism, which is chapter 1. And I want to start out by saying that Chogyam Trungpa, he made a career out of making people feel uncomfortable. And if this book and reading it isn't making you feel a little bit uncomfortable, you're perhaps not understanding it. But the reason he did this is he wants us to examine ourselves at a very deep level, looking within at a very deep level, looking at our approach to dharma. That he felt that the teacher doesn't tell the truth. That what the teacher does is lead the student to discover the truth. Otherwise, it's not your truth, it's the teacher's truth. And so this is a little bit of a clue to why this book and his teachings are the way they are. And I was going over some of Pema Chodron's notes that I had from the book that we had, The Places That Scare You. And she mentioned that in her book too. And a story comes to mind that I heard this, and this is when I was involved with the Chogyam Trungpa organization, Dharma Dhatu, in the Twin Cities. And Rita was involved in that group too, to a certain extent, and it was through her that I made the connection. But this was one of the stories that I heard, that after a teaching, he was walking, and there was a student of his walking with him, and they were outside in a garden. And the student turned to him and said, "What a beautiful teaching you gave." And Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche unzips his pants and starts peeing on some of the flowers and says, "What beautiful flowers." Do you think that made the student uncomfortable? On the other hand, because of this, he could really transmit the Dharma. And so to continue here, ego is constantly trying to convert everything to its own use, even or especially spirituality. And when teachings are seen as external things, we don't want to identify with them. We just want to acquire them, to collect them. He has the example of the antiques in a house full of antiques, that we become actors in terms of actors are acting, they are not real people. That we ignore or pretend to know, well, we don't really know the real meaning. And ego finds comfort in pretending to follow the path. He mentions how that we even use ego for the interpreter. If there's a conflict or if there's a discrepancy between our actions and the teachings, instead of going to the teacher for clarification, our ego rationalizes and explains everything perfectly. So it's no problem. And in this way, we always trust this ego of ours as a spiritual advisor. He says that whenever we think that I am doing this to achieve, this is a quote, we are thinking dualistically and separating ourselves from reality. Then we add a secondary judgment. I should be doing this and should avoid doing that. And at that point, it gets very complicated. That to finish this quote up, meditation means just simply experiencing the quote ape instinct of ego, end quote. So, in other words, meditation is just experiencing that ape instinct of ego, but letting it go, observing it, but letting it go, letting it be. And actually using this first part of the chapter to analyze your meditation would be very good. So the main point of all in any spiritual practice is to go outside of what he calls the bureaucracy of ego. This ego that is seeking more, seeking higher, seeking better, collecting spiritual, or what he calls stuff, from different traditions, different teachers, etc. Using that what we have collected to reassure ourselves that we exist, that we're secure, that we're safe, that we're spiritual people. The problem with this is that there's no giving up, there's no surrendering. If you remember when we were studying Taisitu Rinpoche's book, he talked about the difference between a teacher and a lama. With a teacher, you want to learn from the teacher. With a lama, you want to become like the lama. And so spiritual materialism here is wanting to learn from the lama, but you don't want to become like the lama. So he uses the metaphor of an antique that we, and this is the interesting thing about him, by the way, is that he speaks in such a way that there's a certain amount of ambiguity so that each individual person can see it, the metaphor, a little bit different. And this is why so many people felt that he was speaking directly to them. So the metaphor of the antique, that we bring home one beautiful antique, put it in the house, and then we bring home another beautiful antique. and then another one. And maybe there were a bunch in there to begin with. And soon it becomes a junk shop that you can't see the individual beauty of the antique because there's no space to view it. It's too crowded. And so whether it is something spiritual that is really important to progress on the path, or if it's a piece of antique junk, it's up to the person who is holding it and how they are using it. So the teachings are not, quote, antique wisdom, unquote, to be collected. That in actuality, they are up to date, they are modern. Up to date in terms of November 2021, that type of modern. That what has happened is that great teachers in the past have practiced, they've received teachings, practiced, contemplated, realized the teachings, become the teachings, and then they pass them on to their students who want to become like them, follow them, and they hear the teachings, contemplate the teachings, practice the teachings, and then realize the teachings, and then pass them on to their students up until the present time. So he contrasts this to a grandfather telling children traditional folk tales to his grandchildren. So that is a significant difference. And that is the difference between being a spiritual person following a spiritual path and being engaged in spiritual materialism. He then goes on to the Tibetan saying, quote, knowledge must be burned, hammered, and beaten like pure gold. Then you can wear it like an ornament. And what this means is that we have to analyze these teachings that we hear. We have to chew on them. It's not just accepting them uncritically. It's how does this apply to me, to my situation? Is this true or not? Does it make sense? And so Dharma is applicable to every age and to everyone, but you have to analyze it, chew on it, really look at it very, very, very deeply. And then when you have understood it at a very, very deep level, then you wear it like an ornament. It isn't that you put on an ornament, that you have become that teaching and it becomes obvious. It has a living quality. You take it into your experience. And as I said, while devotion is wanting to become like your guru, it is not imitating the guru or becoming a replica of the guru. That as you progress on the path, your realization will increase if you are following your guru and practicing properly and having a good relationship with your guru, but you will not become a duplicate of your guru. You will become similar to your guru. One of Trungpa Rinpoche's gurus was Gangshar Rinpoche. Trungpa Rinpoche considered himself a crazy wisdom guru, and Gangshar Rinpoche was a bit like that. I've seen pictures of Gangshar Rinpoche, and he had a very, shall we say, intense look on his face. And the story about Gangshar Rinpoche was that he was a very good bodhisattva, behaving very normally within conventional norms and did not stand out. But one time he almost died. And they kind of gave him up for dead. And he appeared to be dead. I do not know if he was like a Daylog and went to other realms or not. But anyway, he revived. And when he revived, he became totally different. And he then became a crazy wisdom guru. And this was one of Trungpa Rinpoche's gurus. Trungpa Rinpoche has a book of teachings about Gangshar Rinpoche. And my Tibetan isn't great, but I think Gangshar means whatever arises, which from what I have heard is a very good description of Gangshar Rinpoche. And that might be a good description of Trungpa Rinpoche. So going back to the book here, he talks about the teachings having this living quality. And here is a direct quote. The teachings have the quality of warm, fresh baked bread. The bread is still warm and hot and fresh. Each baker must apply the general knowledge of how to make the bread to his particular dough and oven. Then he must personally experience the freshness of this bread and must cut it fresh and eat it warm. He must make the teachings his own, and then he must practice them. This is a very living process. So this is the point, that it is up to us to personally do what is necessary to know how to make the bread, the recipe, how to cook it, how to eat it, and so forth, to experience the freshness of the bread. Quite honestly, I've never baked, and reading this made me think about maybe I should learn how to bake bread, because I have had fresh bread other people have baked, and it is delicious, and there is nothing comparable to fresh bread out of the oven. So this is his analogy about the teachings. And when you have that experience of the teachings, your appetite for the teachings increases. You find that your hunger for the teachings increases, and you want more and more, because it works. and you're experiencing the fruit of your efforts. He mentions that the path is lonely, it's individual, that we reach a point where we can't go back to our antique shop. We can't go back to our collection of knowledge. And finally, he says, well, this is that we have to go back to this relationship we have with our guru, rather than going back to our collection of knowledge. And what came to my mind at this point was that I happen to know a person who I would see at KTD, and he would talk about different teachers that he had and books that he had read, and even talk about, I think, the Black Madonna, which comes from Polish Catholicism. And one day, another person that I knew out there confided in me a quote talking about this man, which is gossip, which isn't so good, but I'm going to repeat this gossip. The quote is, "He has many teachers, so he doesn't have to listen to any." The point being is that to avoid spiritual materialism, we have to narrow it down to that one antique and work with that. So now the question and answers. And the first answer is, I'm not even going to repeat the question, is being a foreign religion intensifies spiritual materialistic problems. That there are students who are charlatans. Usually, this is referred to bad teachers. He says, and there are also gurus that are charlatans. Now, this was 50 years ago, but the same is true today. And I looked up the definition for charlatan, and it is, quote, a person falsely claiming to have a special knowledge or skill, a fraud. So we want to avoid being a charlatan as a student. The second question is about his teachers, and his teachers are dead. But his answer, quote, situations are the voice of my guru, the presence of my guru, end quote. So as I mentioned, Khenpo Gangchar is one of his teachers who was a crazy wisdom guru. He had others. But when you become the teachings, you could say the present situation is the guru. There are no rules. There are no shoulds or shouldn'ts. It is your wisdom, your primordial wisdom, that is the presence of your guru and directs you and guides you. The third question is about the Buddha's first teachings. And so he answers that after enlightenment, someone happened to be there and the Buddha spoke. And this is Buddha activity. It's spontaneous. That a Buddha is a very open person, that a teaching can take many or any form and does not have to be a talk in a shrine room, a formal talk. Anything can be a teaching, a gesture can be a teaching. The fourth is about wanting to acquire spirituality. So, quote, it's essential to relate to yourself, to your own experience, end quote. So without relating to yourself, the spiritual path becomes entertainment rather than personal experience. And he issues a warning, and that is, it becomes dangerous if you're not relating to your own personal experience on the spiritual path. Trungpa Rinpoche said this one time about Vajrayana practice, intense Vajrayana practice, and that is, it's like a snake in a hollow bamboo tube. You either go up or you go down. And that's what he's talking about. It becomes dangerous, that you have to be careful before you enter that bamboo tube. Next is how to distinguish what is good action and what isn't. And the answer is, now this is coming from an enlightened viewpoint, that right and wrong are present in this question. But we are not working for one side. We are working with the totality of the whole. That's a direct quote, totality of the whole. Beyond duality. Acting with duality leads to partial actions. Complete actions are beyond good and bad. And I'm going to add to that, that what is most important is our motivation for our actions of body, speech, and mind. And the proper motivation is to be acting for the benefit of others. This is how you begin to transcend duality. The sixth is working our way out of confusion, how to do that. And he says, living by extremes of trying too hard or too little to avoid this. Quote, one has to work with a kind of middle way, a complete state of being as you are, end quote. Allow yourself to trust yourself, trust in your own intelligence. Use your common sense. We have to let ourselves be. This goes back to meditation, of course, of just letting ourselves be. Allow yourself to grow. And again, to allow ourselves to grow, we have to let ourselves be, and we have to allow ourselves space to grow into. It's so easy to live in a very, very confining world where it seems like there are no choices, that you have to do this or you have to do that, that there's no other way. There just aren't possibilities. And you have to let yourself be. You have to let go all of that, allow yourself some space so your own intelligence has a chance to surface and you start seeing possibilities instead of walls. The next is about faith. There are two types of faith: blind faith and confidence, which can't be destroyed. He says that blind faith has no inspiration. It's naive. You never make a connection between yourself and your faith. You just blindly accept the whole thing. Now, faith is confidence. He describes it this way: you have confidence in yourself. You don't have to check yourself. Quote, absolute confidence, end quote, in what is going on now. There aren't rules to tell you how to act. Every situation is fresh, and you have the confidence to act creatively. Again, this is a high level of being on the path, having this kind of confidence in yourself, where you don't have to check yourself. You're not constantly having doubt and second thoughts. And this doesn't happen by accident. It happens through a lot of practice, a lot of experience, and it grows. It's not an all or nothing thing. Gradually, we develop more and more confidence in ourselves, more and more confidence in the teachings, more and more confidence in the Lama. But this is where it leads. The next one is about, again, I didn't write down the question, but the answer is you are guided by being fully who you are. You don't follow a guide. The guide walks with you. And the next one is about ego. The protective method of ego is always checking itself, self-observation. Meditation, on the other hand, is completely identifying with the technique. And in our case, the technique is following the breath. So becoming one with the breath. And if you become one with the breath, there's no room for ego. There's no room for securing oneself, if it is done correctly. There are lots of ways to get lost. And as a result, it's good to check in with a meditation instructor from time to time about your meditation practice. When I was practicing with the Vajradhatu group, they would have visiting teachers, Westerners, come and lead a weekend intensive. And part of that intensive was having an interview Saturday with a meditation instructor, about meditation, and probably having a second one on Sunday about meditation. Trungpa Rinpoche really stressed meditation, 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 meditation. So the next question is, when you're living in a spiritual junkyard, where do you begin? And his answer is, start with one thing, that allow your instincts to decide which one. Get to know it, examine its characteristics. Look at it in terms of simplicity or complexity. Whatever. Examine it, get to know it, look deeply. You don't have to empty the house. On the other hand, that this one thing can be a stepping stone to the rest. But you have to start with one thing. So then finally, the last is, why is it so hard to let go of ego? And he answers that people are afraid, the emptiness of space, the absence of company, the absence of a shadow. Fear that we are losing our identity as a fixed, solid, and defining thing. And I remember Trungpa Rinpoche during a Q&A session. Someone said, I'm afraid of emptiness. And Rinpoche, his answer was, I'm not. The question is, since Khenpo Gangchar almost died and became a crazy wisdom teacher, and Trungpa Rinpoche was in an auto accident, a serious auto accident that left him partially paralyzed. Is there any correlation between that and becoming a crazy wisdom teacher? To the best of my knowledge, there is not. I think he was already a crazy wisdom teacher before the accident. The question was, I can read this book and read it and still feel I'm not getting everything. And this is a good sign because he teaches at multiple levels, that there is a lot of depth here. And it's a kind of book that you can put down and pick up 5 years later if you've been doing serious practice, get more out of it. Read it 5 years later, get more out of it. That it's extremely profound, and I don't understand everything in the book.